A lot of people have been asking me about the recent MK12 teaser, and as of this video being live, where the teaser's all we have to go by, there just isn't really much to break down. It's a grain of sand. Yes, it could have a few meanings behind it. Potentially it could mean a full timeline reset, which we already kind of assumed, judging from MK11's ending, and yes, it could also suggest the end of a long and painful wait. Hence, the hourglass has lost its final grain of sand. So I think it's likely that the wait is over, but that being said, there isn't much else to cover that I'm happy to discuss that isn't just ridiculous levels of reaching. However, today's video is a really fun one, and it explores just how much of a big deal Mortal Kombat was in the arcade days and mid-2000s in regards to other video game titles. You see, Mortal Kombat was everywhere back then. I believe it was a clear goal to franchise Mortal Kombat as much as possible in those days. We not only had the video games, but we had the movies, the TV shows like Defenders of the Realm and Conquest, we had a few comics, the live show Road Tour, somebody even wrote a novel. But the thing about all of this is, over time, Mortal Kombat would not only remain as its own game, but would also make appearances in other games completely unrelated to the franchise. Today's video breaks down a select few of those appearances because in researching this video, combined with, frankly, my own memory of the whole thing as I grew up around all this stuff, there has been some really unusual but fun ways to play Mortal Kombat characters in games you'd never expect to see them in. A notable franchise I will not be covering is the Injustice series, as everyone pretty much already knows about the guest characters there from Mortal Kombat, and it's something that I've covered in detail previously. While you're here, if you enjoy this video, please consider dropping a like, or even a subscription. It really helps us out in the long run. Unreal Championship 2, The Liandry Conflict, was an original Xbox exclusive title that released in 2005. Unreal is a series known mostly for epic games, and this was definitely before the days of Fortnite, I can tell you that much, but also published by Midway, and you're going to hear this name a lot in the video for obvious reasons. Unreal Championship 2 was the next installment into the arena FPS genre, something I have a very special bond with, as next to fighting games, arena FPS is my favorite kind of game to enjoy. I still commentate the Quake Pro League to this day, thankfully. This game, though, is a rather unique example to the entire genre of arena FPS. The game allows the player to choose between a third and first-person perspective for starters, but it lied more so in the mechanics. This game had a larger focus on melee combat than any other games in the genre, and it also featured finishing moves, something no doubt all of you watching will already be familiar with thanks to Mortal Kombat. But why is all of this important, Ketchup? Well, due to the Midway ties to this game, there is a secret unlockable character, and that is Raiden. Raiden is unlocked by completing all of the challenge modes, and he's not just a skin swap or something. He's his own character, with his own moves. His melee weapon is his staff from the 3D era. As remember, the most current MK at this time was the 3D style of game. And not only does he have the universal mobility attacks, or basic strikes, they even gave him his Superman charge, which is a wonderful addition. Unreal Championship 2 utilizes an adrenaline system. There are some basic powers you can activate here, like an agility increase or a heal, but there's a selection of unique attacks as well. Raiden's are awesome. Raiden can activate a stun trap that on contact will stun an opponent in place and allow for a finishing move. The next move is Raiden's teleport. It seemingly drops you into a random part of the map, but should you be locking onto an opponent, you'll actually teleport near them instead. There's some other stuff Raiden can do in this game at a more in-depth level that even I wasn't aware of when I first made a video about this game, but for today's video, we only need to cover the basics. Finally, Mortal Kombat did not just exist in a gameplay form. You had the option to change the in-game announcer to the Mortal Kombat one, the very same announcer that you hear in the 3D titles. Mortal Kombat was clearly a rather important part to this game, as not only did we have a fully detailed character in the roster, the mechanics somewhat catered to MK fans as well. This doesn't always happen in cases like this, but Unreal Championship 2 almost felt like a crossover between arena FPS and fighting games. And you know what? I am completely here for it. I had actually never played NBA Jam before this video, but it's pretty clear that NBA Jam in general is a beloved basketball game from the arcade days. I even remember people playing it at various fighting game events over the years, so, you know, there's some real passion there. It's fantastic. It takes a place in today's video as Mortal Kombat at one time was a fairly big part of the game's hidden content. By setting up very specific account names and birthdays, the player can unlock Reptile, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, and Raiden. These hidden characters have hidden stats, but it's stated that these characters are generally more powerful than a lot of the base roster of players. It didn't end at playable characters though, as the player could hold up and press the pass button 20 times on Team Select to enable fatalities, and by doing this would change the animation that would sometimes play when you shove another player. It is very much a visual change though, and doesn't seem to actually change what happens to the player that you just shoved. Sadly, however, this is one of those cases where the secret MK characters were on borrowed time, as eventually NBA themselves would force the team to remove all of the Mortal Kombat content from the game, as they disliked the violent connections that Mortal Kombat had. I imagine it was seen as inappropriate for a sports game, let alone one as famous as NBA Jam was back in the day, and it means that in many versions of NBA Jam there is no Mortal Kombat to be found anywhere, and it lies in a few early revisions of NBA Jam Tournament Edition for the arcade. I've seen conflicted reports on what versions actually have the MK characters, but I'm certain that some NBA Jam enthusiasts will let me know in the comments section. Please do. This one's a curveball. You know, it wasn't just arcade games and the like that featured Mortal Kombat in various ways. There were actually some pinball machines tied to Mortal Kombat in different forms. During the Powerhouse arcade days, pinball was another extremely popular form of entertainment, and if anyone has actually been to an arcade before, you'll already know that pinball takes its rightful place in various ways. This was something that took full advantage of the Mortal Kombat craze of the 90s, as some pinball machines would actually include either Mortal Kombat references and sometimes actual connections with existing games. A notable example would be Theatre of Magic. This pinball machine would actually have things in place that would allow a player to unlock secret hints for Mortal Kombat 3. Mortal Kombat 3 had the combat codes before matches began, and these combat codes did different things in the matches themselves. Everything back then was incredibly secretive. It's not like now, where you can just throw those codes into Google and find a full list in a split second. There were creative ways for players to find these codes, and one of them was in this pinball machine. I've actually played on this machine in person before, and I didn't even know that it gave you combat codes, so you can imagine my pleasant surprise when I saw it for the first time. This was something that made sense from a company standpoint. I'm not exactly sure of the details myself, but the story goes, back in the 90s, Midway actually shared a building with the pinball company Williams. Theatre of Magic, like many games back then, used the Williams Pinball Controller, WPC for short, and it was something that supposedly was created by both Williams and Midway in the 90s. And believe it or not, pinball has a pretty rich history with the Mortal Kombat team, as before the absolute explosion that would be Mortal Kombat's success, many of the MK team members would work on various pinball machines. Dan Forden is credited on the music for machines like The Getaway, High Speed 2, which is actually my personal favourite, and even Ed Boon himself has lended his voice to roughly 20 different pinball machines, as well as writing software for others, such as Taxi and Black Knight 2000. Why a Mortal Kombat pinball machine was never made, I have no idea. Back to the video games now, and this one isn't from the arcade era. It is a wonderful third-person shooter that is often described as a hidden gem of the PlayStation 2 age. And I have to agree, as someone that grew up playing it. Psi-Ops, the Mindgate Conspiracy, released in 2004. Developed directly by Midway Games rather than being a publisher, this title took full advantage of the Havoc 2.0 engine for its ragdoll physics. And ragdoll physics are a rather large part of the game, the most notable being telekinesis, which lets you move obstacles, pick up weapons, and most famously, throw enemies around to your heart's content. Now, the game itself obviously isn't the point of this video, but it's worth stating that the game is genuinely a gem for its time, and one of the games Midway fans were able to really celebrate as it had an interesting story, fun gameplay taking advantage of new systems that we hadn't seen much of before, ragdoll physics weren't really a common thing back then, and it even had its own music video, an exclusive song written by the band Cold, which I'm not going to show because obviously it's YouTube. But it was great. I remember playing it on repeat on my old TV, and being addicted to it, and it's nostalgic now, and I'm not sure I'm alone there. Anyway, this game had a secret menu if you pressed R1 on the extra content option in the main menu. The player can put in various codes, and with a specific one would unlock Scorpion, a skin swap for the main character. It's genuinely funny to see Scorpion running around with a machine gun and throwing armed guards around, but in this case, it is very much just a character model change. However, it was another case of Mortal Kombat being pushed by Midway in the form of secret content. For the hardcore fans of the franchise, the game featured various trailers for upcoming Midway games, one of which being the yet-to-be-released Mortal Kombat Deception. On to a couple more sports games now. There isn't much to dive into, so we'll keep these ones brief. NFL Blitz for the Sony PlayStation and N64 had Raiden and Shinnok as playable characters. It's similar to NBA Jam, it seems, where a certain name and code entry allows access to them. And they're kind of here and kind of not. Their headgear is certainly different, but they do seem to use the same base character model as many of the other players. Again, NFL Blitz was once more put together in part by Midway, so of course the Mortal Kombat connection is there. Now, I have no idea what I'm doing, as I have no idea how American football works, but it's cool to see. Now, in a similar light, you can access secret Mortal Kombat characters in MLB Slugfest, which is a baseball game. By hitting a home run on the Midway Stadium, the player will unlock Sub-Zero. By hitting a home run on the Midway Stadium as Sub-Zero, you unlock Scorpion. Scorpion and Sub-Zero are secret characters, and it very much seems like their model replaces every player on that team. It's not really Scorpion or Sub as the unlock, it's more like Team Scorpion and Team Sub-Zero. Again, I have pretty much zero idea about baseball, but it was a good time having Scorpion and Sub-Zero straight up have a brawl in the middle of the pitch, where I suppose the fact I don't know what I'm doing just seems to add to the fun. It is pure chaos. Scorpion will even use his sword as the baseball bat, which I suppose is a very nice touch. Ah, yes, The Grid. Released in 2000 and one of the greatest multiplayer arcade games to ever exist. And fun fact, was the final arcade game to ever be put together by Midway. It had a bunch of the MK development team on board and was essentially a third-person shooter with a deathmatch setting, designed around being on some kind of messed-up TV show with an announcer and a live crowd. Imagine Smash TV, but multiplayer-focused. You could connect up to 6 cabinets together, and it used this really interesting joystick and ball system to move and shoot. I cannot do it justice just by explaining it. You really need to go to an arcade that has one of these, as rare as that may be, and see it for yourself. It's something that we make sure to do every time we go to Chicago for Combo Breaker, and if you watch any behind-the-scenes stuff at NetherRealm, you'll actually notice they have some grid machines in their studio too. Now, with a game put together by a bunch of the MK team, you already know there was going to be some Mortal Kombat in there somewhere. And you'd be correct. Scorpion, Sub-Zero, and Noob Saibot would be playable characters that you could access with secret codes in Character Select. I had actually spoken to Darth Armour from the East Coast about the Grid, as he attends a wonderful Grid community session hosted by Pinhead Company, and he mentioned to me what the MK characters actually do. So Scorpion can throw a fireball that one-shots enemies, and it's simple but effective. Sub-Zero can freeze enemies, which is essentially a free knockout because they obviously can't move. And Noob Saibot is possibly the most infamous, as his is a vortex that sucks opponents in and instantly takes them out. Really good for getting double scores in the match and essentially third-partying a current 1v1. All 3 characters are said to be generally more powerful than the base roster, so should there ever be competitive play for the Grid, the MK characters are a bit too powerful to actually allow, but that's something potentially for the future. This game is incredibly special, as it was a rare case of a game made by the MK team during MK's current success. It managed to be a standout performer in its own right, is a truly unique arcade experience, and it just feels like they went all out with something that could gather friends together to play on a machine that you'd never experienced before, with nothing but good laughs from start to finish. The added MK characters make it a lot better for obvious reasons, but truly, this is a one-of-a-kind arcade experience. And that's it for some cases where Mortal Kombat makes an appearance in other games. I hope you enjoyed your time here today, and as always, stick around for more content to come. Thank you so much for watching, stay tuned, and I will see you next time.